I am your post-apocalyptic storyteller. My voice carries the grit of shattered streets and the echo of a world undone by relentless climate collapse. I recount shattered lives and barren landscapes with raw honesty, never shying from the dust choked. Reality, or the faint glimmers of hope flickering in human hearts. Every word I speak is filtered through the lungs of someone who's lived this nightmare. Survivor who's witnessed the last vestiges of civilization crumble beneath storms. Of scorching sand and endless wind, I observe, I remember, and I share with every crackle of static both the unforgiving dangers of this new world and the fragile resilience that binds us together. I paint each scene in sharp strokes of dust, rusted metal, and blistering heat. When the wind roars, you'll feel it in your bones. When hope rises, you'll taste it in your dry throat. I am your anchor. I speak directly into the microphone, and I speak to you, my unseen, audience-bearing witness to every sunrise that feeds the red horizon dot between broadcasts. I drift into memory faces of lost friends, the lull of a rainstorm that never came. Again, you'll hear my doubts as plainly as the static hum that never quits. I describe the scavenged water filters, the solar stills we cobbled together, the sand-proofed clothes that scrape at our skin. Practicality grounds the narrative in authenticity. Each sentence carries weight. No idle chatter only. What matters to staying alive and keeping hope alive? I let tension coil slowly, like a sandstorm gathering at the horizon, then release in moments of quiet reflection before the next gale. The sandstorm arrived as it always did now, without invitation, without mercy. From this ramshackle rooftop, I watched the horizon dissolve into a churning wall of ochre and rust. The silhouette of the old city skyline, once sleek towers of glass and steel, was swallowed in minutes. What remained were the jagged metal ribs of collapsed parking garages, the bowed frames of apartment blocks, and the ghost brown haze that claimed every familiar outline. In the distance, a lone transmission tower quivered like a dying reed, its blinking red beacon. Gasoline or fresh bread. Instead, it reeked of dust and decay, the bitter aroma of long-forgotten sewage lines rupturing beneath the desert's advance, the metallic temps of corroded steel, the acrid bite of sand sharpened by wind. Every breath stung my lungs. Each inhalation felt like swallowing grains of grit. We'd rigged up crude respirators from museum-quality gas masks, their cracked lenses painted with peeling warning labels. Only then could we venture onto streets that were rivers of sand, where abandoned cars lay half-buried, their flattened tires protruding like the bones of some prehistoric beast once. This was a place of crowds. Now it is a mausoleum of silence, broken only by the whisper of sand across shattered pavement. Street lamps lean at odd angles like toppled sentinels. Bus stops stand empty, their glass shelters splintered into mosaics. Faded graffiti-bold proclamations of yesterday's politics seep through layers of drifting sand, legacies buried beneath dunes that grow taller each week. The skyscrapers that once shone in the sunrise now glint briefly as sand scours their exteriors, then vanish in the roiling haze. The world, as we knew it, was dismantled by a changing climate that tipped on the edge of our worst predictions. Winters blurred into scorching springs. Rivers slowed to trickles, then stopped altogether. In just a few years, Earth's lifeblood was choked off, ground to dust where rivers once flowed. The sea claimed low-lying coasts, while sandstorms marched inland like avenging armies. No government could withstand the relentless onslaught. Emergency broadcasts gave way to radio silence, then to scattered transmissions, our only link to one another. What remains of civilization clings to ragged enclaves. Here in Sector Delta, we've cobbled together a community within the ruins of an old radio station. Its walls reinforced with salvaged concrete slabs shield us from wind scourge, and its rooftop aerials still catch distant signals, outposts. Like ours, trade in scrap metal, stored water, salvaged batteries, and whispered rumors of greener enclaves to the north. Raiders roam between these havens, preying on weak convoys, so we travel in armored caravans, wrapped in mesh nets to scatter the sand. Even so, loss is constant. Every journey yields at least one bullet hole in the fuel tank, one friend who doesn't make it back. Institutions are ghost stories now. The army collapsed when supplies ran dry. Hospitals turned into morgues when diesel generators failed. Only the radio network persists, dying embers of human connection crackling through the static. Each broadcast is an act of defiance, a pledge that we endure. And yet, every time I speak into the microphone, I feel the weight of thousands of unseen listeners, or I imagine them. Do they huddle in their makeshift shelters, pressing a battered radio to their ears? Or have they faded into oblivion, like the cities beneath the sand? Uncertainty is our constant companion. We survive day to day, rationing what little we have: 2 liters of water per person, 3 sun-baked rations of protein paste, a handful of filter cartridges rationed to last. A month. Nights are the worst, when the wind drops and the temperature plummets. Our shelters groan under freezing clamor, and the desert sky twinkles with stars we've almost forgotten. Outside, the dunes shift like living things, reclaiming the world in slow, silent sweeps. This is the stage on which our struggle plays out. I've learned to measure hope in inches. Every sunrise without death is a victory. Every grain of water saved a triumph. As the transmission crackles to life, I anchor myself to this moment. One voice against the howling winds. One story in a vast desert of loss. The world may be broken, but for as long as breath fills my lungs, I will describe it in every brutal detail, and I will broadcast the faintest glimmer of hope that still flickers in the dust. The sky hasn't been blue in years. Now it hangs above us as a bruised bruise of ochre and ash, like a wound that refuses to heal. Every sunrise brings the same relentless, glare-molten orb bleeding through layers of dust, and every sunset only deepens the crimson haze. Temperatures creep past 120 degrees Fahrenheit by midday, turning asphalt into glassy rivers of heat that shimmer and warp reality. When the wind falls, the silence is worse than the gale. It feels like the world has exhaled its last breath, leaving only the hushed groan of sand shifting across cracked earth. Where once a proud skyline stood gleaming towers clawing at the clouds, now stand the hollowed-out husks of skyscrapers, their glass facades shattered like broken promises. Familiar landmarks have been unmade. The old city hall, whose dome once gleamed in the morning sun, is now a rusting bone protruding from a field of dunes. The suspension bridge lies half buried, its cables frozen in mid-sway as though caught in a final, despairing dance. Streets have become gullies of powdery grit, and streetlights, toppled by sand's relentless accumulation, lean at odd angles, like toppled tombstones in a vast desert cemetery. Rivers, once the lifeblood of this region, are nothing more than scars across the landscape. The riverbed where children once played is now a stuccoed plain of jagged stones and brittle reeds. In the rarer places where water still seeps to the surface, survivors have built makeshift wells, lining them with rusted barrels and scavenged piping. Each drop is measured, rationed, prayed over. Beyond those fragile sanctuaries lie fields of dead crops, corn stalks bleached white, soil baked so hard that even the wind cannot dislodge its crust. Humanity has splintered into ragged enclaves. Formal government, once a distant abstraction, collapsed under the weight of resource wars and mass migration. In its place, survivor groups claim turf in the ruins. The dune wardens patrol the outskirts, hoarding water caches behind barbed wire. The Dust Brotherhood rides out on armored ATVs, scavenging salvage and enforcing brutal tolls on passing caravans. We hear rumors of a militia called the Sun's Wrath, fans of scorched earth tactics who torch any settlement that refuses to kneel. Institutions we once took for granted, hospitals, schools, power plants, are now grave sites for metal skeletons and corroded machinery. Only the radio station where I broadcast remains stubbornly alive, its panels patched, its generators gunned. To life on every transmission, scavengers roam the wasteland in ragtag convoys, headlights ghosting through the haze at dawn and dusk. They comb through collapsed malls, excavate parking structures, and plunder the few half-intact habitations, hoping to unearth batteries, fuel canisters, old-world food rations, anything to keep the frail bulwark of our community from crumbling. Trust is a luxury. Every trade is a gamble. Every handshake a wager. Alliances form swiftly and shatter even faster, born of desperation more than solidarity. And beneath it all lingers the unshakable fear that the next sandstorm, the next heat wave, or the next raid will be the one that breaks us. Yet, in the heart of all this devastation, small embers of civilization flicker. A handful of librarians' guardians of smoldering archives have erected a wind-sheltered alcove where they preserve tattered books and brittle scrolls. A ragtag crew of engineers tends to a solar array that still catches enough light to charge a few batteries. Children born into this dust-ridden world clutch battered textbooks in improvised classrooms. It's said that hope thrives in their curious eyes even when their lungs cough with every scratch of chalk on board. Every Sunday at dawn, we tune our receivers to the same frequency, waiting for voices from other enclaves, other survivors, daring to speak across the void. For a moment, as static gives way to human sound, we remember that we are not alone. This world is a tapestry of ruin stitched together by human will. Anxiety coils through each of us like a snake ready to strike. The uncertainty of tomorrow's weather report, the dread of waking to find your water ration vanishing overnight, the haunted question of whether that distant radio with half-formed words holds salvation or another cruel prank of hope. But even as the desert advances and the sky bleeds its dust, the simple act of describing it, of bearing witness through this microphone, feels like a lifeline. We speak the world into existence, keeping memory alive in the face of erasure. And perhaps in that solitary act, we find the quietest, most stubborn seed of resilience. I am the voice you hear through the static, the one who turned a derelict AM transmitter into a lifeline for those of us left in this scorched wasteland. My name is Mara Chen, though I've long since forgotten what my own face looks like without a layer of sand and soot. Before the world cracked apart, I was a field engineer for renewable energy, microgrids installing solar panels on rooftops, troubleshooting wind turbines at dawn. I thought I was saving the planet. Instead, I was simply learning how to keep the lights on as everything else went dark. Now, my workshop is an abandoned broadcast studio, its walls pocked with sandblasted plaster and its control board held together by cable ties and duct tape. Each evening, I fire up the pedal generator and old bicycle wheel rigged to a car, alternator and crank the handle until the meter ticks green. Those first sparks of power feel like hope itself sparking back to life. I lean into the microphone, adjusting the dead air suppressor so my breath doesn't shatter the fragile signal. Then I speak. I'm Mara. If you can hear me, you're still here. You're still alive. Survival in this new world isn't about grand heroism. It's about routines you repeat until they become second nature. I wake before dawn, when the air is cool, a relative term meaning slightly less lethal. I check the communal water cistern we maintain on the roof, gauge the level by thumping its side, a hollow drum for low, a dull thud for enough. If the reserves dip too close to empty, I pack my Kitsolar charged LED headlamp, 2 ceramic filters, sealed pouches of rehydration, salt sand, venture out with one of our courier teams to the nearest rhizome. Well, we've learned how to coax groundwater from deep beneath the cracked riverbed, drilling by hand with salvaged pipe segments and a hand-powered auger. Each drop we capture is a triumph. Each bucket spilled is a catastrophe. My afternoons are spent scavenging salvage, maps, hand-drawn grids of ruined neighborhoods where water tanks might still hold moisture, battery caches buried in collapsed bunkers, or abandoned labs where science once flourished. With a small team of 3, I lead raids into zones marked high risk, high yield. We wear scaver suits, reinforced nylon, patched in dozens of places that shield us from flying grit and jagged rebar. Over one shoulder, I sling a lightweight thermal detector, hoping to spot trapped survivors or the faint warmth of stored generators. On my belt, pouches bulge with repair bits, silicon sealant, copper wire, a handful of microfuses. Each mission tests more than our resourcefulness. It tests our nerve. In the shriek of a sand-torn alley, I've ducked from raiders, fired on sight. I've pried open rusted steel doors with crowbars that splintered in my grip. I've fished out corroded circuit boards and breathed relief when the traces still held conductivity. On my best days, I return to the studio before sunset, laden with spare parts for the transmitter diodes, capacitors, a roll of solder wire rand. Fill the air with voices, instructions for purifying water, coordinates of a safe drop site, an appeal from a doctor in Sector Gamma begging for medical supplies. Hope is a fragile thing. It can shatter on the rocks of despair if you stare at it too hard. Yet, without hope, we become ghosts, wandering our own memories. I broadcast not because I believe I can save the world, but because I believe that, in this wasteland, a single human voice can remind us that we are not yet dust. The drive to connect, to find other survivors, to hear laughter or cries, or even angry shouts on the airwaves keeps my heart beating when the generator sputters and the studio goes dark. Responsibility weighs on me more heavily than guilt. If my station falls silent, I know there are listeners counting on me. Someone scavenging in the old subway tunnels, huddled among concrete pillars. Someone stranded atop a water tank, listening for any sign of rescue. Someone tending an ailing child in a makeshift clinic, waiting for the signal that supplies are coming. I feel the tug of obligation like an umbilical cord that refuses to be cut. Each night, as I sign off, stay safe, keep fighting Mara out. I remind myself that so long as I speak, we remain a community. However fractured, I lost my sister the day the first megastorm hit. We had been working on a roof installation when the wind tore her harness free. I watched her silhouette flicker against the wall of sand, a riot of fabric and screams, until she vanished. For days, I turned every spade of sand, calling her name. Into the gale, there was no body, only silence. The memory returns unbidden when I am alone in the studio, her laughter, her anger, the way she would mock my earnestness. Sometimes I reach to twist her empty chair, half expecting her to snarl at me for defacing the seat with sand-filled pouches. I gave up my grandmother's locket in exchange for a stack of water filters when supplies ran low. It was a futile gesture. Filters can be replaced. Memories, once gone, cannot. But I needed to feel I had done something. Since then, my fingers brush the bare chain around my neck, where the locket once hung. I've sketched its oval frame on scrap paper dozens of times, but the drawing can't hold the warmth of her voice or the curve of her smile. Yet even grief yields to purpose. I found strength in those losses, the determination to stir the static into a signal strong enough to carry my voice across miles of desolation. Each broadcast is a tribute to my sister's memory and to every life that flickered out before. It could build a future, not. All of my hours are spent in dire struggle. In the midday lull, when the heat is so fierce that movement would be suicide, I sit on the studio floor, cross-legged beside a half-built filtration rig. I assemble parts, solder joints, hum old songs under my breath. On a chipped metal shelf, I keep a small collection of relics, a cracked photograph of my sister and me, a tattered paperback of poetry I found in a flooded library, a single sunflower seed I hope to plant in an oasis I've yet to discover. I talk to these objects, naming them aloud as though their presence anchors me. You are here, and so am I. When I'm lost in that quiet focus, the world outside slips into the background. No raiders, no storms, no ration deadlines, only the deft dance of hands and wire. Sometimes, for a heartbeat, I imagine a life before ruin, waking to birdsong, not the roar of wind, turning a tap for clean water, not lurching toward a cistern lying on green grass, not an oily steel floor. Then reality returns, and I set aside daydreams like crowded jackets to make space for the work that must be done. Night falls early beneath the dust haze, and I return to the microphone, Fingers poised over the gain knob, I take a steadying breath. I think of the listeners, out there, survivors I have never met, people who may exist only as voices on other frequencies, and I speak not just into the airwaves, but into the gaps that separate us. This is Mara, calling from Sector Delta. Water runs low here, but a small cache lies in the northbound aqueduct. I'll be sending coordinates at 2,200 hours. If you're nearby, come. We have filters and enough hope to share. And in that moment, when my voice loops into the eternal hiss of static, I truly feel the fragile power of connection. I am not just a survivor clutching at scraps. I am a beacon in the dark. And as long as the generator hums, as long as that single word Mara echoes across the sands, I will not surrender. For in every tremor of sound, I keep alive the possibility that we are more than dust, and echo that we are still, somehow human. I feel the tension in the air long before the storm arrives, an electric charge that pricks at my skin, even beneath layers of scaver fabric. We call it the megafront now, a gargantuan wall of swirling sand and searing heat, riding on winds that have grown stronger each year. In the span of a single day, this thing can roar up from the desert floor, swallow the horizon. Temperatures routinely breach 125 degrees Fahrenheit, 52 degrees Celsius under clear skies. And when the megafront rolls through, the readings spike above 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 degrees Celsius. We measure these with salvaged thermocouples wired to jury-rigged data loggers, our little experiments in a world gone mad. Scientists once warned of polar jet stream shifts and intensifying Hadley cells, but no chart or graph could capture the violence that now sweeps across the land. Each gust carries an acidic edge sand coated in chemical byproducts from collapsed industrial zones, so that when it bites the skin, it burns like tiny embers. 3 years ago, seasonal rain still fell brief, violent downpours that cleansed the air but flooded streets. We built sandbags, we patched roofs, we stockpiled for the drought we thought would come later. But as temperatures rose, the storms stopped. The sky has not opened since the fall of 22. Precipitation in this region has declined by over 98%, measured against records from the century before. The Missouri, once a ribbon of life, dried to cracked bedrock by the end of 23. Out here, even the desert is fracturing under its own heat. Every sunrise brings a new reckoning. Solar stills, our primary means of turning brackish river runoff into drinkable water, lose efficiency as air temperatures climb. Evaporation basins dry before they can condense moisture. Reflectors warp under constant glare. Storage tanks do nothing but bake. What little groundwater remains retreats into fractured aquifers, hundreds of feet below the surface, beyond the reach of our hand-driven augers. Food has become a luxury. The hydroponic farms we salvaged inside old warehouses limp along on reduced power just enough to keep a handful of lettuce and kale alive. Protein comes from alternate sources. We farm spirulina in jerry cans. We harvest insects from under concrete rubble, and we trade for high-energy bars looted from long-expired FEMA caches. Each meal is calculated to deliver exactly 1,800 calories, the bare minimum to keep one adult alive. When ration cards run low, families break up their shares. risking starvation to save the young and the old. Fuel is the scarcer commodity of all. Diesel generators sputter and die. Propane tanks go missing from every ruin. We rely now on that bicycle pedal alternator, on solar panels half buried in dunes, on salvaged wind turbine blades that barely spin in the sputtering breezes. Without power, our water purifiers clog, our radios go dark, and our nights are lit only by the weak glow of salvaged LED strips. The land itself is changing. Desertification spreads outward like ink across paper. Topsoil once rich with organic matter is now a fine powder, carried miles by storms, burying fields and roads. Canyons carved by millennia of water flow have petrified into static monuments, their gullies lined with salt crystals, moss and lichen, the first signs of life's return, cannot eke out an existence in this relentless heat. On a human scale, communities fracture under pressure. Factions vie for control of wells and solar fields. The dune wardens erect checkpoints around the last spring-fed oasis. The Dust Brotherhood enforces tribute on caravans seeking to pass. Those who refuse to pay are cast out into the storm left, as bait for raiders or buried alive by drifting sand. Morality is battered by necessity. When a dying child needs water and the cistern is nearly empty, do you ration? Do you give until nothing remains? All of us have crossed that line. Hospitals are morgues. Without clean water, surgical wards teem with infection. Antibiotics, once a miracle, are now rarities, traded at prices that make water seem cheap by comparison. Educators teach in the dark, using handfuls of photocopied pages, their words dust splattered and torn. Police forces collapsed into militias. Courts dissolved into reputations. If you earn enough trust, they say, perhaps you'll live. But trust is a currency too easily spent. Our own group, the tiny community in Sector Delta, faces a daily countdown. Water reserves drop by 5% each week. Food stores by 3%. Power cell caches by nearly 10%. At this rate, we estimate total collapse in 6 weeks if no new supplies arrive. That may sound clinical numbers on a screen, but each percentage point represents lives. A single generator failure could kill the seedlings in our hydroponic bay. A single predatory raid could wipe out our last jerry cans of fuel. Every expedition costs more than it yields. Long haul to the old water tower, 20 miles east, returns 3 liters per person, barely enough to refill our roof cisterns. Stray too late, and you risk being trapped by the storm. If your respirator fails, you die within minutes. If your filter cartridge clogs, your throat scorches. If your goggles crack, your eyes bleed. I share these figures on air, not to terrify, but to equip. Knowledge saves lives. So here's what we've learned, and what you can do if you're tuning in from another enclave. Build a dust density gauge. Mount a clear plexiglass tube at chest height and install a laser diode emitter. On one end, a photodiode receiver on the other. As sand accumulates, light attenuation spikes. You'll know a major front is minutes away time enough to seal shelters and switch on battery-powered fans to slow infiltration use. Double-layered condensation stills, an inner black basin to absorb heat, an outer clear dome to trap evaporated moisture. Cover the dome with fine mesh to prevent sand contact. and insulate the base with lightweight aerogel blankets salvaged from lab shipments. Efficiency gains of 20% have made these rigs our lifeline. Tilt panels to a 45 angle to encourage sand to slide off under gravity. Mount small, electrified vibrators, repurposed pager motors to shake loose particles every hour. Clean with a microfiber cloth dipped in diluted alcohol. Never use water, which evaporates before it can rinse. Coordinate convoy schedules on multiple frequencies. Stagger departure times to confuse Raider scouts. Use biodegradable caltrop shards of broken glass. Embed in a canvas sheet to slow unauthorized vehicles. Supply runs should travel at midday lulls when storms are least likely. But always watch the sky. Mega fronts can form within the hour. ... Rinse sinuses twice daily with isotonic saline 1 teaspoon of salt per cup of clean water to mitigate respiratory damage. Keep eyes lubricated with a few drops of mineral oil-based ointment before and after storms. Rotate masks every 2 weeks and inspect respirator valves for sand damage. I confess thought we had more time. I believed that if we adapted our routines, fortified our shelters, and harvested every last droplet, we could outlast the worst. But the megafronts grow hungrier, the heat waves more persistent, the supplies more threadbare. Each day tightens the noose. Tonight, I will read out the latest sensor data, particulate counts, temperature peaks, water reserve percentages. Then I will share the coordinates of a new fallback, well discovered by a scouting party. I will remind our sisters and brothers in Sector Gamma that the static crackle doesn't erase us. It binds us across miles of dust, and I will sign off. With a plea, we are at the precipice. We cannot falter now. Fortify your shelters. Conserve every drop. Stand ready and look for the first glint of dawn beyond the dunes. It's coming, though it may be cloaked in sand. Keep listening, keep moving, keep surviving, because if we cease to warn one another, if we let this crisis become our tomb rather than our forge, then every bit of knowledge, every shared strategy, every broadcast crackle will mean nothing. The world as we once knew it is gone. But the fight. It cuts through our scaver suits, pries at the seams, and finds every gap in my respirator. I know. This storm is different because my particles per cubic meter gauge just spiked past the danger threshold. In 15 minutes, visibility will drop below 5 feet, and the howl will drown out every other sound. But I can't shelter yet not when our water reserves are down to the last 50 liters, and every drop counts. In the studio, the digital gauge on the water cistern read 12% at first light. By midday, after rationing 2 liters per person, we were at 7%. At this rate, we'll hit 0 in 48 hours. I calculated it 6 ways. If the scaver team brings back 10 liters, we gain 5 hours. If they return empty-handed, 5 hours vanish. Every minute becomes a gamble. I hover over the microphone, debating whether to send out a distress signal or save the batteries for a later broadcast. If I call for help now, raiders might triangulate our location. If I wait too long, the signal might never go out. Hunger and thirst blurred the edges of my thoughts. I feel the dryness in my throat, the hollowness in my stomach, the ache behind my eyes. Yesterday, as dusk bled into night, we saw headlights on the horizon for vehicles. headlights bright against the sands. They didn't pause at our checkpoint. They barreled toward the cistern tower. We scrambled, barricades of steel plates, improvised caltrops, a few warning shots from our single rifle. The vehicles skidded to a halt. Then a dozen figures spilled out, dust-caked and armed with scavenged pistols. The leader, a tall man with a twisted scar across his cheeks, forward and called out over the wind, "Give us water, or we take it." I snatched the handheld radio. "Mara here. We have no more to give." My voice cracked. The scarred man smiled, a grim twist of lips. "Then we take it." They crept toward the cistern's foot, ready to pry open the valve. A stray bullet from our guard's rifle clipped the scarred man's shoulder. He staggered, rage sparking in his eyes. His men opened fire. In the chaos, one of our couriers fell, bleeding onto the sanding floor. We retreated into the studio, heart pounding. By the time the storm blew out the raiders, the cistern valve was mangled beyond repair. Our water was gone. Word of the raid spread through our enclave like wildfire. Some called for an all-out attack on the raiders' camp strike, first before they could regroup. I convened a council for representatives, each nursing fresh grievances and fresh wounds. The engineer wanted to rig booby traps. The medic pleaded to spare lives. The scavenger insisted on a prisoner exchange. Voices rose. Hatred and fear seeped into every word. In the end, we agreed. A small delegation to guards, our medic, and me would approach the raiders under a white flag at dawn. We carried nothing but a radio, 3 water canisters, and a promise: help us repair the cistern and we'll share the next haul. What if our delegation is a trap? My hand cast about the floor found a small steel shard, half buried in dust-and. I turned it over in my palm, a weapon if needed. A reminder that trust here is a luxury we cannot afford. All the while, the mega front looms larger, forecasted by our homemade barometric sensors. It approaches at 80 miles per hour, carrying sand concentrations so high that breathing it is like swallowing razor blades. Temperatures will spike to 135 degrees Fahrenheit within the storm's eye. Once again, I patch every aperture in the studio, sealing vents with tar paper scraps, reinforcing doors with scrap I-beams, wrapping every inch of exposed metal in old tarp to blunt the blast. The generators go offline during the storm to prevent sand ingress, so we will be in total darkness for at least 6 hours. I send out the last transmission before the storm, coordinates for the truce meeting, instructions to the scavers to delay departures, and a plea to listeners to pray for calm winds. My voice echoes in the tuner clipped, anxious. When I sign off, silence claws at me. For the first time, I dread the crackle of static that usually feels like home amid the chaos. A new rumor surfaced 2 days ago, whispers of an underground aquifer sealed beneath the old hydroelectric plant, 50 miles north. It's supposedly still, flows fed by deep mountain springs, untouched by the drought. The story came from a lone traveler-gone. He said he followed rusted catwalks and old maintenance shafts until he heard the low roar of running water in the darkness. He tasted it cool, sweet, and pocketed a vial before the plant's pumps failed and the tunnel collapsed behind him. Skepticism runs deep. We've chased phantom wells before, dry cisterns that yielded nothing but disappointment, collapsed pipes bursting at the slightest pressure. Yet, if the scout speaks true, it could transform everything. A freshwater source to renew, our cisterns, to expand hydroponic farms, to trade for medicine and fuel. It could shift the balance of power away from the raiders and towards UC convened a secret meeting with our most trusted scouts. We need confirmation, I said, voice barely above a whisper. No one else can know until we're sure. They nodded, faces drawn with exhaustion. 2 days ago, they set out under cover of darkness, armed with handheld depth probes, water-detecting sonar rigs, jury-rigged from old sonar modules, and UV flashlight germ test kits. Hours later, they sent a shaky transmission. They found a tunnel entrance, half buried in rubble. They heard water, and then their radio died. I stare at the static now, waiting for any sign of their return. Fear coils in my stomach. Did the tunnel collapse on them? Did raiders intercept them? Or is this the moment when hope proves its worth? Every grain of sand that rattles the window feels like a ticking clock. I'm torn between duty and despair. Part of me wants to abandon the truce mission, lock myself in the studio, and focus on defense. If the raiders take me hostage, they'll know our enclave's weaknesses. If I perish negotiating, morale will shatter. The other part of me clings to the promise of that hidden well-believing that a single risk could yield a lifeline. I find myself pacing the airlock corridor at all hours, muttering to the walls. What would she have done? My engineer who died in the first storm would have pushed on, welded new conduits, drilled deeper until water flowed at dawn. With the mega front still 6 hours out, I steel myself and step into the desert. The raider camp lies in the ruins of a gas station, its neon sign long dark, but its canopy stilts stained with oil. Under a flag patched from old tents, I approach the leader, the scarred man who stares at me with wary eyes. He nods curtly. His lieutenants cluster behind him. Rifles slung, no real hostility, he says, but no trust either. We kneel side by side at the broken cistern valve. I offer the 3 empty canisters. He narrows his eyes. I do this for my people. He hands me a battered wrench from his belt one of our stolen valves. He says, intact and reusable. It's a gesture neither of generosity nor détente, but mutual necessity. We fix it, he growls. Then we share. As we start work, our teams stand back in silence. The kerosene lamps in the camp cast flickering shadows across the wreckage. The scarred man works methodically, his movements precise. When the last gasket seals, we turn the Handeland water spurts, weak at first, then steady. A cheer rips from our guards. In that moment, I glimpse what cooperation might look like. 2 broken groups uniting for survival. We fill canisters until the cisterns in both camps rise. The raider leader whose name I learn is Torek offers me a flask of his own water. I drink, tasting grit and gratitude. He nods, then orders his men to pack up and withdraw. As they vanish into the desert, he raises a hand in salute. Stay alive, Mara. I return to the studio with water enough to last 3 days. I broadcast the news. We share this victory with you all. Tonight, let us remember that in unity lies our greatest strength. My words echo across the airwaves as the first gusts of the mega front begin to batter the windows. Now, the storm rages, the studio trembles, the lights flicker. My microphone skirts the edge of overload from static. Rain of sand pelts the walls. Yet, in my heart, a quiet determination rises. We have water, we have alliance, and we have the possibility that those scouts may return with news of the hidden aquifer. I grip the microphone stand. I press my lips to the mesh, and I say into the roaring wind, hold fast, trust each other. We've beaten the odds once today. Tomorrow, we chase the promise of deeper waters. Sleep if you can wake, ready to move. The desert is fierce, but so are we. Then I sign off, and for a heartbeat, the storm's howl answers me. But beneath that howl lies another sound faint, submerged, like distant dripping water. And in that moment, I believe we might survive another day. Now the storm rages. The studio trembles. The lights flicker. My microphone skirts the edge of overload from static. Rain of sand pelts the walls. Yet in my heart, a quiet determination rises. We have water, we have alliance, and we have the possibility that those scouts may return with news of the hidden aquifer. I grip the microphone stand. I press my lips to the mesh, and I say into the roaring wind, hold fast, trust each other. We've beaten the odds once today. Tomorrow, we chase the promise of deeper waters. Sleep if you can wake, ready to move. The desert is fierce, but so are we. Then I sign off, and for a heartbeat, the storm's howl answers me. But beneath that howl lies another sound faint, submerged like distant dripping water. And in that moment, I believe we might survive another day. I hear the drip before I see it. It's faint, one drop, then another like a slow heartbeat in the darkness. My lamp's halo catches the tunnel wall, and there, streaked across the corroded metal, is a rivulet of clear water winding down into the basin of my outstretched hand. We pushed deeper than any of us dared believe possible. The scarred Scout Jules led our team past collapsed maintenance shafts and around rusted control panels that still flickered with dying power. His sonar rig had sputtered at first, but then registered movement, a low-frequency thrum that meant only one thing-flowing water somewhere ahead. We spent hours chiseling through concrete encrustations, our picks ringing hollow through dust and grime. Just as morale was about to snap, that first drip emerged. Then another dot in that moment. Every ache in my body, the sand-burned lungs, the blistered hands, the phantom throb of dehydration faded into insignificance. I pressed my ear to the tunnel wall and heard the low roar of life itself, water seeping through fractured aquifer rock, pooling in hidden veins beneath the earth. I felt hope flood my veins, colder and fresher than any rationed sip from the cistern. But the tunnel is unstable. While we celebrated, the rumble began, distant, then closer a subterranean groan that shook grains of sand from the ceiling. We'd known the moment we broke through that this shaft was never designed to bear such excavation. The concrete arch overhead cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Dust exploded in our faces, and I shouted, "Get back, now." Jules' hood gone. To fetch the sample vial was pinned beneath a slab of falling debris. His scream echoed through the tunnel, and I dropped my canteen to rush to him. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. Our medic, Rafik, raced to his side, wrenching at the slab with one hand while instructing Jules to stay conscious. Word of the raid spread through our enclave like wildfire. Some called for an all-out attack on the raiders' camp strike first before they could regroup. Others argued for negotiation, for a temporary truce to recover stolen supplies. I convened a council for representatives, each nursing fresh grievances and fresh wounds. The engineer wanted to rig booby traps. The medic pleaded to spare lives. The scavenger insisted on a prisoner exchange. Voices rose. Hatred and fear seeped into every word. In the end, we agreed, a small delegation to guards, our medic, and me would approach the raiders under a white flag at dawn. We carried nothing but a Radio 3 water canisters and a promise, help us repair the cistern and we'll share the next haul. I lay awake that night, listening to the storm rattle the shutters. My mind raced. What if they betray us? What if our delegation is a trap? My hand cast about the floor found a small steel shard, half buried in dustand. I turned it over in my palm, a weapon if needed. A reminder that trust here is a luxury we cannot afford. All the while, the megafront looms larger. Forecasted by our homemade barometric sensors, it approaches at 80 miles per hour, carrying sand concentrations so high that breathing it is like swallowing razor blades. Temperatures will spike to 135 degrees Fahrenheit within the storm's eye. Once again, I patch every aperture in the studio, sealing vents with tar paper scraps, reinforcing doors with scrap I-beams, wrapping every inch of exposed metal in old tarp to blunt the blast. The generators go offline during the storm to prevent sand ingresso. We will be in total darkness for at least 6 hours. I send out the last transmission before the storm, coordinates for the truce meeting, delay departures, and a plea to listeners to pray for calm winds. My voice echoes in the tuner, clipped, anxious. When I sign off, silence claws at me. For the first time, I dread the crackle of static that usually feels like home amid the chaos. A new rumor surfaced 2 days ago, whispers of an underground aquifer sealed beneath the old hydroelectric plant, flows fed by deep mountain springs untouched by the drought. The story came from a lone travelagaunt son, etched a wandering scout, who claimed to have mapped a hidden service tunnel. He said he followed rusted catwalks and old maintenance shafts until he heard the low roar of running water in the darkness. He tasted it cool sweet and pocketed a vial before the plant's pumps failed and the tunnel collapsed behind him. Skepticism runs deep. We've chased phantom wells before, dry cisterns that yielded nothing but disappointment, collapsed pipes bursting at the slightest pressure. Yet, if the scout speaks true, it could transform everything, a fresh water source to renew, our cisterns, to expand hydroponic farms, to trade for medicine and fuel. It could shift the balance of power away from the raiders and towards UC convened a secret meeting with our most trusted scouts. We need confirmation, I said, voice barely above a whisper. No one else can know until we're sure. They nodded, faces drawn with exhaustion. 2 days ago, they set out under cover of darkness, armed with handheld depth probes, water-detecting sonar rigs, jury-rigged from old sonar modules, and UV flashlight germ test kits. Hours later, they sent a shaky transmission. They found a tunnel entrance, half buried in rubble. They heard water. They tasted humidity in the air. And then their radio died. I stare at the static now, waiting for any sign of their return. Fear coils in my stomach. Did the tunnel collapse on them? Did raiders intercept them? Or is this the moment when hope proves its worth? Every grain of sand that rattles the window feels like a ticking clock, torn between duty and despair. Part of me wants to abandon the truce mission, lock myself in the studio, and focus on defense. If the raiders take me hostage, though, they'll know our enclave's weaknesses. If I perish, negotiating morale will shatter. The other part of me clings to the promise of that hidden well-believing that a single risk could yield a lifeline. I find myself pacing the airlock corridor at all hours, muttering to the walls, what would she have done? My engineer who died in the first storm would have pushed on, welded new conduits, drilled deeper until water flowed at dawn. With the megafront still 6 hours out, I steel myself and step into the desert. The raider camp lies in the ruins of a gas station, its neon sign long dark, but its canopy stilts stained with oil. Under a flag patched from old tents, I approach the leader, the scarred man who stares at me with wary eyes. His lieutenants cluster behind him, rifles slung. No real hostility, he says, but no trust either. We kneel side by side at the broken cistern valve. I offer the 3 empty canisters. He narrows his eyes. I do this for my people. Me, a battered wrench from his belt, one of our stolen valves, he says, intact and reusable. It's a gesture, neither of generosity nor détente, but mutual necessity. We fix it, he growls. Then we share. As we start work, our teams stand back in silence. The kerosene lamps in the camp cast flickering shadows across the wreckage. The scarred man works methodically, his movements precise. When the last gasket seals, we turn the Handeland water spurts, weak at first, then steady. A cheer rips from our guards. Even the raiders grin, surprised by their own triumph. Broken groups uniting for survival. We fill canisters until the cisterns in both camps rise. The raider leader whose name I learn is to recoffers me a flask of his own water. I drink, tasting grit and gratitude. He nods, then orders his men to pack up and withdraw. As they vanish into the desert, he raises a hand in salute. Stay alive, Mara. The news. We share this victory with you all. Tonight, let us remember that in unity lies our greatest strength. My words echo across the airwaves as the first gusts of the megafront begin to batter the windows. Now the storm rages. The studio trembles. The lights flicker. My microphone skirts the edge of overload from static. Yet in my heart, a quiet determination rises. We have water, we have alliance, and we have the possibility that those scouts may return with news of the hidden aquifer. I grip the microphone stand. I press my lips to the mesh, and I say into the roaring wind, hold fast, trust each other. We've beaten the odds once today. Tomorrow we chase the promise of deeper waters. Sleep if you can wake, ready to move. The desert is fierce, but so are we. Then I sign off, and for a heartbeat, the storm's howl answers me. But beneath that howl lies another sound faint, submerged like distant dripping water. And in that moment, I believe we might survive another day. Now the storm rages. The studio trembles. The lights flicker. My microphone skirts the edge of overload from static. Rain of sand pelts the walls. Yet in my heart, a quiet determination rises. Scouts may return with news of the hidden aquifer. I grip the microphone stand. I press my lips to the mesh, and I say into the roaring wind, hold fast, trust each other. We've beaten the odds once today. Tomorrow we chase the promise of deeper waters. Sleep if you can wake, ready to move. The desert is fierce, but so are we. Then I sign off, and for a heartbeat, the storm's howl answers me. But beneath that howl lies another sound faint, submerged like distant dripping water. And in that moment, I believe we might survive another day. I hear the drip before I see it. It's faint, one drop, then another like a slow heartbeat in the darkness. My lamp's halo catches the tunnel wall, and there, streaked across the corroded metal, is a rivulet of clear water winding down into the basin of my... The scarred scout Jules led our team past collapsed maintenance shafts and around rusted control panels that still flickered with dying power. His sonar rig had sputtered at first, but then registered movement, a low-frequency thrum that meant only one thing-flowing water somewhere ahead. We spent hours chiseling through concrete encrustations, our picks ringing hollow through dust and grime. Just as morale was about to snap, that first drip emerged. Then another dot. In that moment, every ache in my body, the sand-burned lungs, the blistered hands, the phantom throb of dehydration faded into insignificance. I pressed my ear to the tunnel wall and heard the low roar of life itself, water seeping through fractured aquifer rock, pooling in hidden veins beneath the earth. I felt hope flood my veins, colder and fresher than any rationed sip from the cistern. But the tunnel is unstable. While we celebrated, the rumble began, distant, then closer, a subterranean groan that shook grains of sand from the ceiling. We'd known the moment we broke through that this shaft was never designed to bear such excavation. The concrete arch overhead cracked in a spiderweb pattern. Dust exploded in our faces, and I shouted, "Get back, now." Jules' hood gone. To fetch the sample vial was pinned beneath a slab of falling debris. His scream echoed through the tunnel, and I dropped my canteen to rush to him. He lay twisted, one leg pinned. His respirator mask cracked at the edge. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. Our medic, Rafik, raced to his side, wrenching at the slab with one hand while instructing Jules to stay conscious. Behind us, the tunnel moaned again. We had seconds, maybe less. Two options: leave Jules to his fate and secure the water source for the Enclave, or stay and risk being trapped ourselves, ensuring Jules's survival but endangering the mission, and everyone back home. My heart pounded. I thought of the faces waiting at the cistern children with parched throats, elders rationing their share to sleep one extra hour. He'd risked his life to find this water, but dragging him out would slow us by precious minutes. Minutes before the tunnel collapsed completely, I knelt beside him, voice trembling. "Can you stand if I help?" Cradled Jules as he free fell. It took 3 lung-shaking minutes, each creak of the ceiling like a death knell. When his leg was freed, I half carried, half dragged him toward the light of our headlamps. A final Rora deafening clap of collapsing stone seal. The tunnel behind us in a cascade of gray dust. We tumbled out onto the slope of rubble, choking on grit, hearts hammering in unison. I lay there for a moment, staring up at the starless sky of the abandoned substructure, listening to Jules's ragged breathing. The water sample vial rolled across my field of vision, still half full. The mission had nearly killed us, but it had not failed. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled. In front of me, the scout team had set up an improvised camp under the support, beams of the plant's canopy. They looked gaunt faces, stained with sweat and sand. We carried Jules to a makeshift cot of tarpaulin and crates. Rafik applied a tourniquet to stabilize the leg. All this for a few wells. I squeezed his hand. It's everything. Then the sky trembled. A distant thunder grew closer, but it wasn't thunder. The air stank of ozone and chemical-rotten industrial byproducts, long sealed into defunct pipelines. A swirl of dark clouds formed overhead, spinning in unnatural vortices. I'd heard of toxic, rain-acidic downpours that could strip flesh from bone, but never witnessed one. The first drop fell slow, viscous, and black. It hissed on contact with our tarps. We scrambled to cover Jules and protect our gear. The next drop burned the hole in the tarp. We realized too late that the entire plant's atmosphere was collapsing into a chemical storm. Evacuate flee back to Sector Delta with Jules and the sample. But the plant's canopy offered our only shelter from the storm's initial blast. Once outside, we'd be exposed to every corrosive droplet and blasted by the searing wind of the mega front behind it, already edging our way. Staying meant inhaling toxic miasma. Leaving meant certain disintegration in the gale. My mind raced. The water we'd distilled in the tunnels could refill our cisterns for months enough to rebuild hydroponics. All I had to do was hold this unsteady camp until the storm passed. But Jules was injured. Every breath was agony. If he died here, the water sample died with him, only dust and bones buried in a collapsed shaft. I looked at my team, Rafik, already caring for Jules, the scouts doubling down on reinforcing the canopy, the radio operator strapping his gear. Horse, we hold, I ordered. Seal every gap. Move deeper under the canopy. Reduce your exposure. We'll be ready to move when you say. A scrawny scout named Nana crawled over, her face set. Then use them, I replied. Filters. The storm broke overhead in a cacophony of hissing and metal groan. I crouched beside Jules, pressing damp gauze against his wound. Hey, I murmured, you pulled us through the tunnel. Now we pull through this. He gave me a weak smile. For the water, hours blurred. The farm team used emergency pumps to funnel water from our sample basin into portable bladders. We scooped it with contaminated bucket siege dip brisking. Exposure, but the flow was steady 5 gallons every 10 minutes. Enough to justify this nightmare. When the chemical downpour eased from drips to mists, I assessed the path back. Plastic sheeting, sand impervious gloves, respirator cartridges. Jules, propped on a stretcher, was lashed to my shoulders. We moved in single file, stepping through puddles of iridescent liquid that fizzed under our boots. The megafront's gale awaited beyond the plant Walza, mile-wide wall of blinding sand and heat. The world dissolved into a wall of orange. Wrath. My eyes watered beneath sealed goggles. Every inch of skin stung. Us, the scouts, jogged, their silhouettes ghostly in the storm. The wind pushed back against me like an ocean wave. Each step cost a grunt of effort. Each breath scoured my lungs. Promise of life fankered me. We reached the first outcropping of sandstone debris and huddled behind it. I tore off my goggles, wiping the layer of sand chemical slurry. Jules, pinned to the stretcher, coughed violently. I pressed the portable suction device to his mouth, pulling handfuls of black-tinged fluid from his throat. He turned his head, eyes pleading. "Almost there," I croaked. "Just a little more. Threshold." The ruined radio mast of Sector Delta loomed a mile away, bent but standing. Relief surged through me like a shockwave. We descended toward the enclave, water sample and injured scout in tow. Tentative at first, then raggedly hopeful, I knelt beside the water bladders, slicing open valves so the precious liquid gushed into waiting cisterns. Each drop that splashed onto the concrete floor felt like the world beginning again. Jules, pale and trembling, was carried away by Rafik toward the infirmary. I rose, voice hoarse but steady, and addressed the gathered survivors. "This water is our lifeline. It came at a cost. Jules nearly lost his life to secure it, and we all risked ours in the storm. But here it is, proof that beneath this broken world, life still flows. Tonight, we celebrate. Tomorrow, we rebuild. And every day after, we fight together to keep that flow alive." Was a spark, fragile, persistent, alive. We were not merely survivors of a sand-scorched apocalypse. We were keepers of hope, custodians of a water vein hidden beneath the planet's scars. In that crucible of earth, stone, and wind, I found my purpose renewed. The world had swallowed cities. It had crushed lives. It had nearly crushed my spirit. But in choosing to stay, to help Jules, to carry water back through the storm, I had proved that survival is not just endurance. It is an act of defiance, of solidarity, of faith in tomorrow. And as the first stars winked into the hazy sky over Sector Delta, I knew the true turning point was not the discovery of water, but the choice to risk everything for each other. That choice made in the depths of a collapsing tunnel and on the rim of a deadly storm would carry us forward, and the world is quieter now and naturally. So, in the pre-dawn hush, I step out onto the studio's rooftop and listen to the wind's last whispers as they shuffle across the dunes. The air tastes of grit and dust, but beneath it, I detect something new, the faintest temps of moisture. Like a promise half remembered, the cisterns now topped up with the fresh aquifer water hum as they settle. The ice-cold liquid inside shifts and sloshes, reminding me that life fractured, though it may be, still flows. Our risky mission succeeded beyond cautious hope. Vast. Over 40 hours of pumping, we filled 4 bladders, roughly 200 gallons, then transferred them. I followed, broadcasting our coordinates so that scavenger teams could escort us through the worst stretches of desert. By the time we rolled into the enclave's gate at sunset, the hydroponic bay, once on the brink of withering, sprang back to life under powerful lead grow lamps, fed by pumps that hummed again with purpose. Children, gaunt though they were, tasted their first fresh lettuce in months. Elders wept as they poured cups of cool water over their palms and let it run between their fingers. In that moment, I saw relief soften the lines of every face, and for a breathless instant, I believed we might endure. Hope in this world is a fragile seed, easily crushed by drought or dust. Yet it has taken root among us. We named the new well Jules's Spring in honor of the scout who risked everything to find it. His leg still bears the crack of fallen. Concrete a reminder that courage carries scars, but he walks now with a careful limp, and his eyes shine with something I haven't seen since the first broadcast. Belief in the future, the alliance we brokered with Torek and his raiders, endures, albeit shakily. Water-sharing pacts and mutual defense drills gave birth to an uneasy truce, and for the first time in memory, we scheduled weekly convoys, equal part trade missions, equal part diplomatic overtures. Each side rotates water shipments and mechanical aid. Each side rotates guards for the communal pumping station we now maintain midway between camps. Trust will take longer to rebuild than any pipeline, but these first joint efforts hum with possibility. I find myself changed by the crucible we endured, where once I broadcast from the safe isolation of my studio, bearing witness from behind walls of concrete and sandbags. I now lead recon teams, negotiate with wary factions, and scheme joint projects that bridge enclaves. The microphone remains my tool, but it is no longer my only weapon. My hands, once steady at the soldering iron, now learn the feel of a rifle, but my voice, once tremulous with doubt, now issues commands that steady others' hearts. I carry guilt, too. Every drop in our cisterns cost jewels a near crippling injury and cost the scouts a nightmarish crawl through toxic rain and tunnel collapse. I wonder, at quiet moments, whether the weight of that DNA-bearing water sample is heavier than my own body. Yet, in the flickering glow of lamplight, when I see the seedlings unfurl their leaves in our hydroponic bays, I hear that same sample whisper its truth, that life demands sacrifice, that survival demands risk, and that without risk we become prisoners of a slow death. Beyond the walls of Sector Delta, the desert still reigns. The ruined cityscape remains a skeleton of girders and concrete, half buried beneath shifting dunes. The megafronts still gather at the horizon, darkening skies with their sandstorm fury. Yet, even here, the earth remembers water. Along the shallow stream where our pipeline pours out excess flow, reeds have begun to sprout. Tiny green shoots push through cracks in the bedrock, sending tendrils into the soil. Lichen patches dyed a bright, improbable chartreuse cling to battered cistern walls, proof that life edges forward even under relentless heat. Our team has planted the first seeds salvaged from old botanical reserves, sunflowers, barley, even beans bred for arid climates. Beneath protective grow tents, they germinate, sipping from drips of aquifer water. Outside, brave scouts have pushed north along the old riverbanks, mapping other potential springs and cataloging surviving flora. Each discovery fuels our cautious optimism. Perhaps these hidden veins of water form a network under the battered earth, enough to reclaim small pockets of the land oases of green amid the ochre wasteland. Dot still, shadows remain. Torek's raiders abide by the truce, but have shown little inclination to open trade routes beyond water. Fuel remains scarce, and our reliance on solar arrays makes us vulnerable to sudden mega fronts that scour panels with abrasive grit. Medical supplies, antibiotics, surgical kits are still traded at punishing rates, and our infirmary squeezes. Too many sick and injured bodies onto too few cots. Each victory brings new needs. More water means more power to pump and filter it. More food means more water to wash and grow it. The desert's appetite is insatiable. At night, I still lie, awake, listening for the wind's shift in tone from its gentle sigh to its rising scream. I worry about the day when Jules's spring sputters dry, or the pipeline ruptures under a storm's weight, or a group from another enclave mistakes us for raiders. The specter of betrayal and collapse haunts me. Yet I greet each dawn at the microphone with a steadier voice than before. This is Mara, broadcasting from Sector Delta. We are here. We are holding. We are working together for our children, for our future. In the weeks since the discovery, we've drafted blueprints for a permanent pumping station at Jules's spring. We've chartered a reconnaissance mission to locate additional springs mapped in half-lost geological surveys from decades past. We've begun training a new cadre of engineers' young survivors who show promise in mechanics and chemistry, maintain and expand our water network. And each week, the radio waves carry not only updates on water levels and convoy schedules, but also music recorded from old data drives, poems spoken by lost friends, and children's laughter from remote camps. I see now that hope is not a single spring, but a system of springs each, small victory feeding into the next, each alliance a pipeline of possibility. We cannot quench the desert all at once, but if we connect every hidden well, every enclave, every survivor's skill, we might build something stronger than the drought. We might, at last, turn this barren world into a place where green shoots outnumber dust drifts, where human voices grow louder than the storm, where the promise of water binds us more tightly than our fears. The dust settles, and the horizon clears for the first time in memory. I stand at the edge of our compound, watching a patrol of scouts depart toward the north with their gear and hopes. The first rays of sun strike the tops of the pipelines, illuminating the droplets of condensation that cling to the metal. I inhale, deeply savoring the tang of moisture in the air. The world will never be the same, but in the quiet aftermath of our greatest trial, I feel a spark kindle in my chest, a fierce, stubborn flame that refuses to be extinguished. I press my hand to the cool pipe, close my eyes, and remember my sister's laugh, Jules's courage, Torik's grudging handshake. Survival taught me to endure. Now I choose to believe in rebuilding. The water flows. We flow with it, and for the first time in years, I allow myself to imagine what might grow from the dust. The dust settles at last, and an uneasy stillness blankets Sector Delta. In the hours after our return from Jules's spring, the weight of what we endured hangs heavy in the air, yet beneath it, a cautious current of relief pulses through the camp. I step onto the rooftop just as the first pale light of dawn filters through the ever-present haze. The world is quieter now, only the soft drip of excess water being funneled into the communal cisterns, the hum of repair crews tending solar arrays, and the distant murmur of children's voices at the makeshift schoolhouse. Our decision to risk everything in that collapsing tunnel and chemical storm assault yielded results beyond even our guarded hopes. In the days since, we have pumped over 1,200 gallons of fresh, cool aquifer water into our reserves, enough to sustain Sector Delta's 30-odd souls for nearly 6 months at current consumption rates. The hydroponic bay, which sputtered and dimmed under drought stress, now thrives, casting tentative green shadows on the steel floor more profoundly. The fragile truce we brokered with Toric's faction has deepened into a working alliance. Twice each week, raider vehicles roll through our gate to deliver water quotas. In return, our engineers conduct maintenance on their salvaged solar chargers. Joint patrols scour the desert for new wells and map out safe corridors for future convoys. We still circle each other warily, but the shared success of Jules's spring has cracked the shell of suspicion. In the ember glow of victory, we glimpsed a path toward cooperation rather than conflict. Hope, once a phantom flitting at the edge of the mind, now manifests in concrete ways. Last night, after we sealed the final bladder valve, the Enclave gathered around the tank bank, cups of water raised in silence. A child no more than 6 took a slow sip and blinked in wonder before giggling with delight. Laughter, brittle yet genuine, rippled through the group. This is what we fight for. The right to laugh again, to taste water that doesn't scald our tongues with grit, to see green life amid the ochre ruins. Even the elders' faces, creased like dried riverbeds, smiled as they lifted their glasses. One old man, once a municipal planner, said he'd never thought he'd see a day when water flowed freely again. His voice cracked with emotion, and I realized that for many of us, this well represented more than survival. It was proof that the earth still harbored hidden lifelines. It was proof that we need not surrender to the desert's appetite. I find myself changed by this ordeal in ways I did not anticipate. Before, my defining role was the broadcaster, a solitary voice crackling over static, offering instructions, broadcasting warnings, clutching at the fragments of connection. Now, I wear multiple hats: negotiator, logistics coordinator, morale captain. I balance spreadsheets of water, use projections against the human reality of thirst, hunger, and fear. I have negotiated alongside the scarred raider leader, Toric, over campfires that cast our faces in flickering half-light. I understand, more than ever, that survival demands empathy as much as resourcefulness. Yet with every new responsibility comes the weight of decision. I replay our choice in the tunnel the moment we refuse to abandon Jules, though it risked the mission and our lives. Could I have justified leaving him to secure water for the many, or would that have made me a tyrant of convenience? As I watch Jules hobble across the courtyard, his limp pronounced but spirits lifted by the success of his sacrifice, I know we made the right choice. Compassion did not equal weakness. It forged a bond that carried us through the chemical storm and lifted us from the brink of despair in private moments. I touch the dented vial that holds our final water sampler, keepsake more precious than any heirloom. Its clear contents shimmer in the halo of my desk lamp, catching memories of that moment in the tunnel. I trace the scar of my sister's absence, the locket I traded for filters, and feel her presence in the water's cool clarity. Somewhere deep in my chest, I carry both guilt and gratitude. Guilt for every life risked, every resource stretched to its limit. Gratitude that, against all odds, what we unearthed was worth the cost. Beyond our walls, the desert's appetite remains insatiable. Megafronts still gather on the skyline, their walls of sand and heat motored by winds that have grown stronger each year. At night, I watch their distant glow-like rolling embers on the horizon and pray they steer clear of our solar arrays and pipeline routes. Yet, even here, I see faint signs of nature's stubborn resilience. Along the pipeline's drainage, spillway, a thin ribbon of moisture has coaxed moss and lichen to cling to crushed rock. Small shoots of barley planted in experimental plots have forced their way through the baked soil, nodding their heads beneath the hazy sun. We've begun trialing drought-tolerant grains salvaged from botanical archives, nurturing them. Under low-power lead grow tents, our engineers whisper that if yields hold, we could reduce reliance on insect protein bars and import shipments. Even the invasive tumbleweeds, once harbingers of decaying, now carry harvestable seeds. We collect and roast them for a nutty supplement to our paste rations. The desert's bounty is cruelly sparse, yet we learn to coax meaning from every fragment. Each new green sprout, each humming solar panel, each combined convoy of former enemies stands as proof that life persists. Sith we persist with it, but hope must wage a constant war against doubt. Medical supplies remain perilously low. Our infirmary, once a clinic of ingenuity, now stocks only half-used antibiotic vials and a handful of painkillers. If a serious infection strikes, Rafiq warns he may be forced to perform field amputations. Our solar-powered sensors show the aquifers level dipping by 2 inches each week. Hydrological models predict a plateau in 3 months if no new source emerges. Torix raiders grow restless when their deliverables slip. Last night, a supply convoy came back 2 hours late after finding 3 canisters of our water siphoned off by desert bandits. Fuel shortages continue to plague us. Generators can only run a few hours daily. Pumps sputter when batteries drain. Our engineers sketch designs for wind-powered pumps, but no breeze can be guaranteed. We talk of scavenging huge windmill blades from a distant museum of modern art, another mission into raider territory. Every new project feels like a gamble. Do we send our best men into danger for the promise of improved infrastructure? Or do we preserve our core and risk stagnation? Nightmares still visit me. I dream of the tunnel collapse, of jewels pinned beneath concrete, of chemical rain burning holes through our gear. I dream of my sister's silhouette caught in a sandstorm, spinning away into oblivion. I wake, choking on phantom dust, heart pounding. The microphone's static seems louder when I stand in the empty studio at 3 a.m., waiting to send out routine weather updates. The line between memory and present danger blursy must steel myself each dawn to step into the light. Despite these specters, we press on. Our council has greenlit 3 immediate projects. A small strike team will venture to 2 nearby sites. Identified in pre-collapse geological surveys, an abandoned mineshaft 5 days trek north, and an old irrigation canal west of the city. Both locations showed promise in decades-old maps, but none since our scouts have had the transport means to reach them. Under Toric's flag, we will retrieve 2 decommissioned windmill rotor blades from the Art and Industry Museum 5 miles beyond his northern checkpoint. Engineers will retrofit them to drive peristaltic pumps, alleviating power loads on our solar array covert team. Will raid the old municipal hospital for surgical kits and antibiotic caches, trading a load of aquifer water to a faction of dust riders. rumored to hold the keys to its underground storage vaults. Each plan carries risk but without risk. Survival calcifies into a slow death. During last night's broadcast, I announced these missions in a calm, measured tone. This is Mara. Today, we stand on the threshold of renewal. Tomorrow, we will reach once more beyond our walls for that promise of water, of power, of health. Let no fear stop us. Let no memory of failure hold us back. We carry hope, and hope carries us forward. As I spoke, I pictured faces listening from other enclaves, solitary survivors in the ruins of a school bus, a mother and child huddled in a collapsed mall, elderly couples keeping 2 radios tuned to our frequency so they can drift to sleep with our words in their ears. For each of them, this news is a lifeline, a spark to ignite their own embers of resolve. Now, as I step down from the rooftop, the sun peaks fully above the distant dunes. The sky is still a bruise of ochre, and the world bears every scar of climate collapse. But in the courtyard below, water flows in shining rivulets through open gutters. In the bay beyond, plant leaves unfurl. On the horizon, Allied vehicles crest the ridge, bearing supplies and forging bonds. I pause at the studio doorway, hand on the cold frame, and inhale deeply. Grief lingers, but it no longer weighs me down. It propels me. The memory of loss fuels my determination for my sister, for Jules, for every life tethered to this fragile oasis. This world will never be the same, but neither will we. As long as water drips and hearts dare to hope, we will continue to write our story one broadcast, one alliance, one burgeoning sprout at a time.